On the right, we have an income-oriented portfolio. Both have $1 million that we start with. Both would draw $40,000 a year to survive. That's $3,333 in a given month. If we look back at the performance, this is benchmarked to the S&P 500. This is what people say is the safest thing you can find in some cases in the stock market. You're diversified in 500 different companies. The S&P 500, if you didn't know, is a collection of 500 different companies, the biggest companies in corporate America. Not GE's because the GE just left the S&P, but the Microsofts of the world, the Apples, the bigger companies. So if you look, there are 18 years listed here. About 5 are negative. So again, these are well-performing. Look at some of the performance here. It's 26%, up 28%. This is the market supposedly doing well for you. But what's happening here? When you're drawing down the income in these down years, because you're drawing down the money, because of the fact that you have these down years, you're taking the money's going down significantly faster than if you're not having to sell shares. Because of what's happening. You're living on the eggs and not the chicken. I love that metaphor. It's so perfect. You're living on the money that's generated by your assets. This is when your money works for you rather than you working for the money. And that's what people don't understand. They just think that, okay, I'm supposed to go into my 401k and keep adding. And then I'm just supposed to deduct. But that's not the case. Again, the old adage, your money's supposed to work, either you're working for the money or the money works for you. There's a time when it's okay to take a step back and let the money work for you. And that's what you're doing by making that switch. And to my knowledge, I hate to sound cliche, but to my knowledge, in this area meaning South Bay, I don't know of anyone that specifically targets themselves and orients themselves as an advisor for income, as an income strategy. Why do you think that is? Why do 90 to 95% of advisors out there, including the bigger firms like JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, Ameriprise, L.P.L., why did they orient themselves and focus on a growth strategy? Could it be about, I don't know, more money? Could it be about making more money for commissions? Possibly. They are suitable. We talked about suitability versus fiduciary standard. But again, going from this example, you start with $1 million, you end up in $1 million because you're only sticking to that $40,000 budget, if you will. You're only living on the interest and the dividends, so you don't have to sell shares to survive. Here, you're selling shares, which is catastrophic. And you go from $1 million portfolio to a little over $300,000. Which do you think would be better to lead to your beneficiaries? $1 million or $300,000? Make sure at that funeral, you want your kids crying for the right reasons. Make sure when you're leaving them money, you're leaving the most you possibly can.
They're just brats, though.
They are brats, but you know what?
They're yours.
You have options. You always get the charity if you don't want to live with brats.
They're your brats.
So let's take a second, if you will, and take out your feedback form. If you don't mind just filling out some information, I really appreciate that. And while you're doing that, we're going to take a second to let you fill that out. And once you're done filling it out, if you can give it to Ashley. Ashley's going to come around and collect those in just a second. While you're doing that, while you're filling those out, I'm going to tell you what to expect. I'm going to tell you what to expect from the meeting. Now, as you may be aware, Torrance in some cases may be parking challenged. I have great news for you. Our building is not one of those buildings. We have 5 levels of absolutely 100% free parking. So you never have to worry about even valet. It's great. Just pull right in, and there you go. We have a great, beautiful parking lot, 5 levels.
You guys do not share this with anyone, and there's
No.
no solicitation with
That's correct. All information is completely proprietary, completely captive. We do not resell this information to anyone. So when you come in to see us, we're going to start by asking you one question. And you probably can already figure out what that question is, because I've already said it earlier. What is your purpose? Only when we find out what your goals are can we actually figure out what the path is. And most people coming in to talk to me, we're probably talking about things like RMD. That's the no-nonsense topic that usually people talk to us about. They want to apply this textbook information to your particular situation. But understand that I've been doing this a long time, but we don't just give RMD seminars. We also do Social Security, we do retirement planning, estate planning. We do a variety of other seminars. So you're not limited just to RMDs. If you want to talk about strategy for beneficiaries, now they can take the money, create a legacy, we can do that. If you want to talk about when the best time is to take Social Security, this is a kicker. Social Security has become so complicated, there's so many strategies you can do. We have software, literally we can put your information in and run it through the software that tells you the best time to take Social Security.
Oh, wow.
It's ridiculous how complicated Social Security has gotten into. But anyway, I digress. The fact is, it's your hour. We can talk about anything you want to talk about. I recommend we talk starting base, the RMDs, we can go from there. But it is your meeting. What I will not do is beat you up over the head to be a client. That is not what we're doing. As I mentioned before, it's completely complimentary to meet with me, and it's your hour. Take advantage of this opportunity. I encourage you. You're under zero obligation in any way, shape, or form. I am an educator, I'm a professional, I like working with professionals, and for that reason I encourage you to take advantage of our time together. And as you're filling that out, let's talk about what people are usually doing again in their portfolios, and why it's important to meet, whether you meet with me or somebody else, why it's important to work with a fiduciary. When you call up a bigger firm, the JP Morgans of the world, the Wells Fargos, the A.G. Edwards, the powerhouses, if you will, Oppenheimers. If you call them up and say, what should I invest in? 9 times out of 10, they're going to put you in a growth-oriented strategy, regardless of your age, and they're going to recommend mutual funds in that account. So in some cases, people may think, well, hey, out of all the investments out there, this guy recommended mutual funds. So mutual funds must be the right instrument for me. No, that's what they sell. A lot of financial advisors out there are under the guise of an advisor, but really are just salespeople. When you work for the bigger firms, the Wall Street machine, they have hired these representatives to sell their product. And what is the product? Stock. And even if they call it a mutual fund, all a mutual fund is a bunch of stocks. Maybe some bonds thrown in, bond funds thrown in, maybe some cash, but by and by, it's just a stock. It's like if you go to a Porsche car dealership, even if you wanted a minivan or if you wanted something more conservative, like a practical car, what do you think? If you go into a Porsche car dealership, what kind of car are they going to sell you? A Porsche. Now you say, hey, look, maybe I need to haul my trailer, maybe I need to go into snow, and maybe a Porsche isn't great for me. Well, they may throw in some snow tires, they may throw on a trailer for you, but it's still a Porsche. It isn't the minivan you probably wanted or what you needed when you first walked in there. So for that reason, it's important you understand what their motivation is. And when we talk about fiduciary versus suitability, again, being suitable as an advisor, all they have to do is recommend alternatives, and that has to be appropriate. It doesn't have to be right for you. As a fiduciary advisor, I have to do what's right. I have to put your needs before my own, and that's the big difference. Yes?
I have a question, I don't know who it applies to. But anyway, is there a difference between a fixed annuity? Is it an IRA or is it a 401?
Actually, it's a fixed annuity is a whole other world. Annuity is just something that happens on an annual basis, even though you can be paid monthly. And without getting into the minutia, on a very high level, it may or may not be right for you. That's actually, you're opening up another hour conversation, which I'm more than happy to do if you want to come and talk to me about. They're good, in a nutshell, they're good annuities and bad annuities. And what your goal, again, your purpose is everything. So they may or may not be right for you. And that's something we can talk about if you want to come in and see me. Okay, so if everyone could just hand over their feedback forms at this point, I'd appreciate that. Actually, if you don't mind coming around and collecting, that'd be great.
Are we still going to page 5 and 6?
Yes, we're about 10 minutes out, and then I'll get you out of here. I know we're running a little bit behind. I told you there's a lot of information. A lot of information. And there's nothing worse than going to a seminar, a workshop, and all it is one big sales presentation. I think that. you're going to learn a lot more than what we've already covered. I know you've learned a lot, but there's a lot more left. And I promise you that you're going to get a lot of information today. So we're going to do our best to trudge through the rest of this information. And again, if you want to apply this to your particular situation, feel free to schedule that meeting and we'll talk about it as it applies to you. Okay, so Ashley, thank you. Go ahead and turn to page 5 in your outline. So what you don't know, we talked about already. It can kill you. But what about your beneficiaries? Well, it's even worse if your beneficiaries don't know what they don't know. I understand that there are different rules that happen when you die. If you're over 70.5 versus if you're under 70.5. And on a very high level, there are 4 ways you can pass money on to your beneficiaries. Number 1, they can inherit the money as one lump sum, in which case they have lump sum taxes. Not the ideal, because you'll get killed on taxes that way. Number 2, they have essentially, they can step into your shoes. If you're, for example, a spouse and you get an inherited IRA from your spouse, you can take it just like your spouse was taking it. Right? No harm, no foul. Number 3, you can do what's called the 5-year rule, where you have about 5 years to take it over that course of those 5 years, or you can take it at the end of the 5-year period. That's the 5-year rule. Or, number 4, you can do what we mentioned before, which is the stretch IRA, where if you say, for example, if you have a child that takes your inherited IRA, they can stretch it over the course of their lifetime. And because most children are younger than their parents, they have the opportunity to stretch it over their life, meaning they can maximize the amount of money they can receive. And that's usually what most people do. Now, I can tell you, I mean, we already talked about it. This is the quiz question. I always like to throw some quiz questions out there. Do you guys remember? Do you have to take an RMD when you die, the year you die?
Yes.
Yeah, you do. I do. We have a client that came to us not too long ago. This is actually kind of legendary around the office. And this gentleman came to talk to the president of our company, Anthony Sakara. And it's kind of typical. We start by saying, how can we help you? And this particular gentleman that came in from an RMD center, he's like, well, I don't want to be here. And I happened to be sitting in the office that day. And we looked at each other strange. And then Anthony looked back at the gentleman and said, well, why are you here? And Jeff, the individual, said, well, Michael told me to come. I don't really want to be here. And Michael is actually another client of the firm's. And then once Anthony did some probing, he said, well, essentially Michael, this other client, recommended Jeff come in because Michael told Jeff, he said, you don't know what you don't know. And just take time out, talk to the firm, find out what it is that you need to know now that you've gotten this inherited IRA. And to give you background about this particular individual, he basically was in his late 30s, sales professional, making a nice chunk of change, making $175 a year as a sales rep, doing fine. He had his own property. He inherited a property from his mother, and he inherited a $60,000 IRA from his mother. So the first question that Anthony asked was, what are you going to do with this IRA? And then the response from Jeff was, nothing. And Anthony says, no, you're not. And Jeff said, what do you mean, no, I'm not? After they had a discussion, Anthony told him the information that we've told you here today. And then they sat down, Anthony did the calculations. It turned out that had he not come in to see us and done something about the IRA, based on the RMD, the fees, the penalties, and not having the taxes, he would have had to give up $50,000 of that $60,000 IRA based on the fees and the penalties by not knowing. So as you can tell, you probably guessed, they're good friends today. They golf, they're very tight, but it's important because you don't know what you don't know. It's important you ask someone who does know what they're doing. Okay, so another thing I want to discuss very briefly, we're about to wrap up here. The verbiage on your beneficiary forms is very, very crucial because how you pass on the money is going to be different. Right? There are 2 ways to pass on that money. There's per capita and per stirpes. Per capita just says, look, if you're passing the money on, you move on to a better place. You have 3 kids, and there's nothing worse than your kids passing before you. I can't imagine anything worse. But if one kid did happen to pass, the rest of your money will be going to those 2 kids. If it's per stirpes, if you have 3 kids, one passes on before you, the grandchildren, your grandchildren essentially, the kids of that kid that passed would get the money, not the other 2 kids. So I'm not going to ask you what kind of verbiage you have on your beneficiary forms. Most people don't know. So it's important you go back, and because we get caught up in the swing of things, we're people of repetition, we have habit, it's important you take this up. This is a good reminder. It'll be ice over the head, if you will, to go and make sure all your your beneficiary forms are up to speed and they're where you want the money to go. And again, just to give you an idea, time after time after time, there's been court case after court case where we see a situation, even in our office, where, let's say you've been married and divorced 3 times, but people forget to change the beneficiary forms.
Ooh.
If you want to leave a bad taste in your current spouse's mouth, don't change it. Leave all your assets to your first spouse. Talk about cursing someone's name. Yeah, let's avoid that. Now, if you come in, there's one other thing we can talk about, and that's inheritance and estate planning strategy. To give you an example, there's something you can do where, in some cases, your kids may not need the money for your inheritance. They may be successful doctors or lawyers or what have you, and they just don't need the money. In some cases, getting that money may be, I would say, a burden, but it might not be as beneficial as another strategy. In that case, you can do something like, it's called disclaiming, essentially. Your kids can basically essentially disclaim the money and have it go to the grandchildren, in which case you can maximize your legacy and really leverage your estate to a point where, for example, if you did that and had the money go to the grandkids rather than the kids, by skipping that generation, if, for example, you had a $100,000 inherited IRA and you're just born, right? Let's say they're just born. With that $100,000 IRA, over the course of their lifespan, they'll be paying $500,000, they'll be taking $500,000 in RMDs over the course of their lifetime on that $100,000. Oh, and by the way, they'll still have $500,000 left. Think about that for a second, on $100,000. So again, if you're looking to create a legacy for the family, that's a great way to do it. Come in and talk to me, we can discuss how to do that. Here's another quiz. I love these little quizzes. Do you have to take RMDs from a Roth for a Roth? We'll start with a Roth first. Did you take it from a Roth? Are there RMDs for a Roth IRA? No, nothing, not for Roth. What about a Roth 401k?
Yes.
Yes. Yes, yes, you can easily roll it over. But yes, that's a big shocker to a lot of people.
Why?
Big shocker. Okay, so we're going to turn to page 6. What if you don't need the money? What if you don't need the funds? Well, if you don't need the money, that's a great position to be in, and I commend you. But the challenge is the government's going to start taking out that, they're going to force you to take the money out, whether you want to or not. So what are the choices? What can you do with that money? You have to take it, you don't want it, where should it go? Well, my favorite is you can spend it, my personal favorite. Vacations, something fun. But again, understand that when you take this money out, you got to be taxed on it, so be careful. You can reinvest it, but again, then you're looking at possible taxes, depending how you invest it. You can gift it to your kids, we talked about that before. You can give it to your charity. Some people say giving it to your kids and charity are the same thing. With charity, it's funny because in the IRS code, it's like 10,000 shades of black and white. Of gray. But with this particular case, when it comes to donating to charity, it's very black and white. Most people don't do it correctly. Most people haven't hit their bank account, and that's not as advantageous because that goes into your standard deduction for taxes. The way that people should be doing it, where it behooves you to do so, is you take the money, you pick up the phone, you call your custodian, and have the custodian go directly from your account to the charity of choice. There's something called tax-free and tax-exempt. Without getting into the details, that's a whole other conversation. But it's tax-exempt. It appears, the money goes, it fulfills your RMDs and it doesn't appear in your tax return. Which means, again, it goes to where you want, but you don't get dinged on it. So again, a right or wrong way to go to charity. And finally, you can have it go to life insurance. And I like this way, because what you're essentially doing is you're leveraging the money you're forced to take out that the government insists you take out, and you're leveraging it to a bigger amount of money. So you're beating the government at its own game by taking this money out, where you're taking a little bit of money, getting a lot of money out of it. And that's it. If you're doing great health-wise, it's a great way to go. Now, one of our final points of conversation that I want to address before we leave here today, and I don't want to get too deep in the weeds, but understand that it's something that has to be addressed, and that's long-term care. I have never seen anything wipe out a multi-million-dollar portfolio faster than long-term care needs. Because people will think they're sitting tight, they're sitting pretty, they're fine, they have some money, but again, once you have to hit long-term care, boom. Even with long-term care, what are the challenges with long-term care? Number one, maybe you don't have enough. That's the biggest problem I see. Number two is the increase in the premiums. Time after time after time, I've seen people, the rates going up 20% one year, the next year 20%, next year 40%, to the point where people are priced out of the market. We had a situation where someone came in where the woman, it was a couple, and the woman had early onset of dementia. And she had just canceled her premiums because of the fact they kept raising it so high. And we tried what we could to get it back, but we couldn't get it back. So again, when it comes to long-term care, I mean, this is the biggest detriment I've seen in people's future. I mean, if you look at any retirement home, do you think, if you went to any retirement home and looked around and asked people there, do you think anyone thought they would be in that retirement home?
No.
Zero. You probably think they would end up there. And 3/4 of people will end up there, statistically speaking. So knowing that there are 5 things we can do about addressing this issue. You can do the Ostrich Strategy, where you just stick your head in the sand. You can try to self-insure and cash flow it, but I mean, that's going to drain your assets pretty quickly. You can be a burden on your friends or family, if they even, assuming you have a good relationship with them, and they still love you at that point. You can do long-term care issue. You can address the long-term care issue, and you can get long-term care insurance, which again, you can expect to have rising rates all the time. And to understand how bad it's gotten, there used to be a plethora of companies, but those 10 or 15 companies have now been reduced to just a small handful. They're like 2 or 3 now. There's like Genworth, Uno, and like 1 or 2 others that, that's it. There's not a lot of options now. Well, there's another trend that's happened lately, and that's asset-backed or asset-based long-term care insurance, where you're basically doing life insurance with an added rider, where you get the money back, something you don't get with long-term care. And in terms of leveraging that money is the best way to go, in our opinion. And it's been something of a trend. It's only caught on hot recently, because it's something that's been added on to a life insurance policy, wherein you're basically taking money that's sitting in a bank account, you just move it to a different bank account with an insurance company, and you're able to leverage that money for a greater sum since there's a death benefit. Furthermore, if you need to draw that money down for long-term care insurance, you can do so. Furthermore, you have the option to do a rider where those great benefits that you get can be extended for the entire part of your life for an extra bit of money. So while you put money into something like long-term care where the rates go skyrocketing and you don't know how much you're getting or may not be enough, you don't have to worry about that with leveraging with asset-backed care. So if you want to talk about that in your consultation, you're certainly welcome to do that. Guys, we talked about a lot. You've been a great audience so far. We talked about what RMDs are, why they exist. We've talked about how they affect taxes, how they play into Social Security. We've talked about strategies, how to take RMDs. We've talked about how to calculate them. We talked about how your beneficiaries play in everything. Well, I could go on, but I'm going to stop it there. We're done. Again, I want to thank you so much for your attention. And understand what we talked about today is just a small piece of the pie. There's a massive amount of information that we haven't got into, and that's why you want to work with a professional, whether me or somebody else, to go over that information. We've talked a lot about all those traps. Don't get caught in one of those traps. So without further ado, I now open up the floor for a little bit. We're actually behind time. We have a few minutes for a Q&A. I'm going to open up the floor to your questions.
I have a couple of questions.
Please.
70 and a half.
Correct.
That we have
7.5.
to RMD, like we have to withdraw money.
Yes. 7.5 is when you have to start taking out money for RMDs. Every
For
year
how,
thereafter.
until we do what, 71 and a
Until
half?
you die. You
Oh,
start at 7.5 until the day you die.
Oh,
And even then, you're. what's
no,
it's
annually.
Well, yeah, that's up to you. You can take it once annually, you can take it monthly, you can take it any way you like. The IRS doesn't care how you take it, as long as you take the full amount that's due by December 31st of that year. Except for the exception of April 1st of the first year you take it. But generally, it's December 31st. Is that
So
clear?
as soon as I reach the 70 and a half,
Yes.
that's when it starts.
Okay, well, to give you an example, let's say your birthday's in June, and that's when you turn 7.5. You can take it any time that year.
Oh.
You don't have to take it once you hit 7.5. You can take it any time that year, as long as it's taken that first year. So if your birthday is June, but you want to take it in January, that's fine. You want to take it in December, that's fine too. As long as you take it any time that year, as long as it's, again, roughly 3.65%, depending on what your age is with your spouse.
You mean before I hit, the 71 and a half, or the first,
The calendar year. So, okay, let's
right,
take
you
this.
mean the calendar year?
Yes, yeah.
Oh.
This is good that you're clarifying this, and I'll try to remember this for future seminars. But so that year you turn 7.5, you can take it any time that year. So again, we're in 2019 now. Let's say you just turned 2019. You just turned 7.5. You can take it any time. You could have taken it 2 months ago. You can take it next month. Anytime you take it, you can take it monthly, quarterly, weekly, doesn't matter. Daily,
Yeah.
minutely, it's up to you.
So it's the tax year that counts.
Yes.
So if your birthday were, say, like October, November, and you turn 70, it would be the following year after that because it ends December 31st.
Okay, so again, you're going to look on the balance of your account for the preceding year, 2018, December 31st of 2018. That's how you know what to take out. And by the way, we take it out earlier because we live in a digital world. And
Yeah.
mistakes are made, both on the custodian's part and because we live in a digital world. You never know what happens. So
Right.
we take it a little earlier, and then we deal with the balance thereafter. But you want to make sure you don't get caught in that rut. Don't rely on technology or your custodian. The custodian is under zero obligation by law to let you know. Most do, but they are under zero obligation. You talk and cry to IRS, it's on you. No one else's responsibility. So don't rely on your custodian. And I can tell you from a personal, I manage my mother's affairs. So she didn't take her RMD, and I relied on the custodian, the holding custodian, which is, I'm not going to name the bank, but I was not happy with them, and they made an error. And again, you can't go back. I relied too much on the custodian in the first 2 years. In the third year, I caught it. Luckily, we took too much out, so that we weren't dinged. But believe me, the custodians are not perfect. So do not rely on the custodian.
So if I want my RMD to go to my grandson directly,
Yes.
will he be taxed on it?
Yeah, so anytime there's money exchanged, yes, it's income. And he's going to take it as ordinary income. Now, you have to be careful. So you're taking the money out. So then we get into a layer of complication because then you're talking about the gift tax.
Right.
So anytime you pass on money to another generation, there are certain rules and restrictions. We can talk about it if you want to come to the office. On a very high level, it's like $14,000 a year allowed to gift him over a 5-year period. And you don't have to do it on a year-by-year basis. You can give them a lump sum. But generally speaking, it's 5 years, $14,000 each year.
So he wouldn't be taxed under, or so?
He will be.
14,
Oh yeah, outside
Under
of the
14, he would be okay.
outside of the tax, the gift tax. Yeah, over that he
I
would
could
be.
just hand it.
But yes, you'd be okay under the gift tax.
And will I be
But
taxed?
you'll be taxed on it. Yes. 'Cause
I'll be taxed.
You'll be taxed because you're taking the money out. The
Yeah.
reason the IRS requires you to take that money out is because they can tax you on it.
That's right.
So you will be taxed on it
You
if
have
it
to
says a
see what to do
gift.
with it, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
So
but-
yeah, there are certain layers of complication. Yes.
Right, if it's as a ordinary income, then it's gonna be taxable.
Correct,
Can
based on your-
we use, right,
Yes.
tax withholding?
Based on your AGI, your adjusted gross income. So they're taking all your income sources, things like municipal bonds, things like everything. So all that comes into play, your ordinary income, income from your job, your investments, your rental income, pension money, all that's taken into
So
account.
everything.
Can that-
Right, as the ordinary income, when we file the tax season, the portion or all of RMD that we have to withdraw,
Yep.
can we use that as under the category for, as the tax withholding?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
We should use the tax, tax withhold, that should be the amount, portion or all of it.
Yeah, on all the months, so again, if you're looking at different income sources, RMD is just one of the sources. Your tax, as it adds up, that's what bracket you're gonna be in for that tax year. So if you're taking social over here, if you're taking rental income over here, pension over here, add on RMDs, and that's gonna be
No,
another source.
from IRA.
From your IRA, yeah, that RMD comes from your IRA. So that's another source of income you're not gonna add, it's gonna affect your tax.
So we can't use the withdraw the money as tax withholding. It should be.
Yeah, come talk to me after the event. and we'll go
So
into it.
it comes as a 1099 too, right?
Yes. It-
Okay.
You're gonna do what's called a 1099-R, and then the next question I usually get is, how does the IRS know? The custodian has to fill a form out called 5498, which actually the custodian reports to IRS, and they match up the 5498 to your 1099-R. And that's how they know. So if you took more out, they're fine with that, they just tax you more money. If you tax under, then they ding you.
And you could put a gift tax, you could give the child the money, or you could put it in a college fund.
Yes, you can reinvest in the college fund, but again, don't understand that, the interest and dividends, depending where, if it's a 529, then that's, that's different. That's tax-free, the interest and dividends are tax-free, correct. But you're still taxed on that money when it comes out.
I'm always going to be taxed, whatever I do with it.
Right,
Yeah.
right. Because as soon as it leaves that money, that holding account that you have it in, that as soon as it moves from there to you, you get taxed. Whether you give it to somebody or no matter what, it's because it is accountable to you.
And try explaining to the IRS that you didn't know. We had a woman come in who she had $40,000 of her RMDs that she didn't have to, she had $40,000 of taxes she had to pay because she didn't check a box properly when she went in to roll the account over. And that wasn't even her fault, it was the person at the bank that didn't check it properly. And she tried to explain to IRS, oh, I didn't know. Well, you checked the box, you signed it, it's on you.
That happened to one of my girlfriends. She just told me, she
There you go.
said, I've been fighting with IRS now for pretty much almost 2 years.
Yeah.
When she had her, you have your money and you roll it over from I would just use 401k. Well, she rolled it over, but she rolled it over to someone else.
Yeah.
They didn't show that she rolled it over. The company, what they did was they showed that she did it twice. They made a mistake. Who did it? The one that was being rolled over from.
Yeah.
They showed, instead of them saying that she rolled over, I think she had like $400,000. They said that she rolled over $800,000. But it didn't go to the rollover.
Yeah,
It was as if she took it as an income.
Yeah, it's horrible. And I see those mistakes every day. Guys, we have to wrap up. We're good. It's been a pleasure. I hope you had learned something. You're very welcome. Hopefully I'll look forward to seeing you in the office. Have a great rest of your day, guys.
Thank you. And take your feedback home? Ready?
Yeah, I was just writing it down.
Oh, it's okay. Take your time. We have a few more minutes.